The following podcast was produced by Big Head Amusements for KQEK.com. Born in the former Czechoslovakia, Elia Cmiral sought out a career in film composing, moving to Sweden and eventually establishing a permanent home base in Los Angeles, where he gained recognition for his work in thrillers such as Apartment Zero, the TV series Nash Bridges, and John Frankenheimer's epic car chase film Ronin. For the past 25 years, Cmiral has scored a multitude of genres, showing an adeptness for electronics, orchestral works, and the meticulous blending of both disciplines. In our conversation, Cmiral discusses the music of the third Atlas Shrugged film, Who is John Galt, available on CD directly from Atlas Productions and digitally from iTunes and Amazon.com, plus the horror film Cam to Cam, and being the subject of Petr Kanka's documentary, Elia Cmiral, Part 1.
For Atlas Shrugged Part 3, this is then your return to the franchise. And for the third film, I wonder if there were any specific changes that you did for the music, for the themes, compared to the first film.
Yeah, there were changes. First of all, that was important for me and for producers to connect Part 1 and Part 3 thematically. Part 3 is very different from Part 1. It's more dramatic, more it's darker. Also, we see finally John Galt on the screen. So I couldn't just take music from Part 1 and rearrange it and put it to Part 3. I used one or two themes from Part 1, but otherwise everything was written new music.
Because I noticed that it has a really lush sound, and I wonder if there was a decision early on prior to the scoring where you discussed the characters and you discussed the themes, and there was a decision to emphasize sort of melody and harmony instead of something much more dissonant.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We want to go for a classical sound, classical Hollywood sound, lush, big orchestra with choir, harmonies, thematic material, contrapoint. It is contemporary, but I noticed that the time of big themes are not really existing now. Now, I try to follow the vision of the Hollywood golden age scoring.
I think that definitely comes through, especially in the orchestrations, because there's a certain lushness to the score, but it's not overstated. That's one of the reasons why I think I like the scores so for the balance that it has.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think it turned out really good. We recorded orchestra here in Los Angeles, which added the lushness of sound. Of course, I mixed it with a mixer who is familiar with the Hollywood sound, and I have three great orchestrators also knowing how it's supposed to be done and how to write it. And myself, I studied this style, so I had everything in my hands. So I think the result is really good.
Well, I'm curious that because the score is so meticulously engineered, especially with this score, at what point do you start to work with the sound engineer, and what sort of things, I guess, does he expect from you as the composer, and what things do you expect from him to ensure that you reach the final sound that you want the score to have?
Well, this project is very special in terms of finishing and time when my music engineer Jim Hill, when he came into the production. Usual situation is that I write, I orchestrate, then orchestrators come in, and so that's the moment when actually engineering comes in at the recording and mixing in the very end. In terms of Atlas 3, it was very different because we had three different dubs. So Jim actually worked with me in the very beginning. We mixed, I believe, 5 major cues as a demo mixes. So he was already familiar with music. Then a couple of weeks later, I think like 3 weeks later, we did another mix of the whole dub, including all my demos plus these 5 cues. They were written already, and we remixed it to 5.1 for another preview of the movie. And then, of course, the final dub where he mixed orchestra. So he was actually involved from throughout the whole process, which is very unusual and makes it much easier for us to communicate because he knew the music from very beginning to the very end. So I think we mixed the whole score in like 4 days, which is, I think, unbelievable. In 4 days, whole score.
I guess part of that must come from working with the LA musicians because they have a long-standing reputation for being incredibly fast and incredibly accurate.
Oh yeah, everything comes from, you have to come from the very beginning. It has to be written the way so it's playable, and it has to be played by musicians. They are fast and they perform really well, and it has to be mixed with someone who knows how to mix it, and then it goes very fast.
I understand that the director was James Manera, and I think according to his biography, he also did some work in television, and I think he directed an episode of Nash Bridges, and I wondered, had you worked with him prior to Atlas 3?
It's incredible how we met. I never worked with him when I did Nash Bridges, because composer usually in TV works with producers. So I knew who he was, but I never met him this time.
Well, his background, I think, seems to be both in directing and producing, and I wonder if that background made it easy for him to communicate with you as to what he wanted the score to be and what specific areas he wanted to have emphasized in the film.
Well, Jim had ideas of what direction he wants to go, but unfortunately I didn't have a chance to work with him. He was not involved in music and post. When I came in, I worked entirely with the producers.
And then I wonder if we could move on to a horror film that you recently scored called Cam to Cam, and if you could talk a little bit about that film's score in terms of its makeup, whether it's electronic, whether it's orchestral, or if it's a hybrid of the two.
It is a small movie, horror, shot in Thailand, with a friend of mine, director-producer Joel Siphon. And it's a hybrid score with electronica and some solos, fiddle, a couple of places, and some live percussion. That's about it.
You've done a number of hybrid scores over the last several years, and I wonder if for you, like your approach and some of the sounds that you use now are distinctly different from what you did, say, 10 years ago, either because of technology or perhaps because of the conventions now in terms of what a horror score should sound like, or what you've been able to inject into a score to kind of get away from sort of more common sounds that producers expect to hear.
I think it goes hand in hand. Technology, the sound, what is hot or what is the sound, today's sound of horror movie. Also, I would say I always like to have live musicians to work with as much as I can, but it's not always possible because of budget restrictions or time or another difficulties. So I try to have live musicians anyway, sometimes in limited versions. So I utilize whatever is good for the movie, for the score. For example, violin it elevates the whole score to the different level because it's even one or two or three musicians elevates the quality and the perception of the score to a different level. The same thing with the score for Wicked Blood, which is another recent drama. I had a string quartet combining with guitars, mandolin, dulcimers. So again, small budget, small movie, but I had a couple of great musicians, and I just like to work with organic sound and live musicians.
I wonder if that affinity for organic sounds sort of enabled you to drift between specifically horror films and dramas, because while one can grasp some of the stylistic aspects of your writing, at the same time, when you write a horror score, it's very much geared towards the atmosphere that's needed for that drama. And then when you write a drama, whether it's a historical piece, it's completely different. Because, as you mentioned, I think in the past you've written for large orchestra, you've written for chamber pieces, different period settings and different styles. And I wonder if by choosing to do horror, it's allowed you to think a bit more, sort of be more flexible, be able to be so versatile, because I'm always impressed by the way that you can drift between the two genres, which require often very different sounds.
I think drama and horror, they are kind of in a similar corner, right? Maybe horror goes a little bit farther than drama, and maybe the story is a little bit more simple than drama. Drama is a drama. I always try to find the voice of the movie and go for it. Try to take the sound. What is the essential? How can I help movie? That's my approach. I think that's what music should really do to help movie and follow the emotional storytelling. Because what we see, but what we feel, that's where music comes strong.
The last project that I wonder if we can talk about, and perhaps in a bit more detail, is a documentary series, because I understand that there is a documentary that specifically focuses on you. And I guess part one is currently listed in your CV, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about this project, how it came to be, and also what it's like being essentially the center of attention this time.
I really don't know how to respond to this, because it came to my attention a couple of years ago. A Czech director in Prague called me and asked me if, how I would feel to do a documentary about my life and my work, and I was like, is it time for? I mean, I'm still active, and I want to be writing and be active another couple of years. This is not the end of my career. This is like now we do the documentary about my life achievements. It's like that's like really. So I said, okay, I can do it only if you do like a part one, what I've done, and then we look forward in a couple of years and we continue from there. So the director and photographer came to Los Angeles. They did some shooting in my house and me, and in Los Angeles to interview a couple of producers and composers, and it was interesting. And it was interesting for me also to suddenly stop my intense work, because I go from one go to another one. So suddenly I have to stop and look back, which I've never done before, and talk about scores and projects and collaborations I've done years back, and it was kind of interesting for me too.
Now, I imagine that must be one of the more difficult things to do, where you have to reflect, because I think when you're working on any kind of a creative project, all your thoughts go into it and you hyperfixate it. It's the only thing that you live and breathe. But I guess when someone says, "Talk about your life," it's got to be very difficult.
Yeah, it's sort of, they talk to my kids, to my wife, and of course to me, and I was like, how was it? How was I feeling when I did this? I mean, time goes so fast. It feels like it was yesterday. I went to John Frankenheimer's house and talked to John. Suddenly, everything goes kind of you look back and like, wow, I've done this and sounds pretty good.
I guess what's unusual as well is that it's very infrequent when the composer is actually the subject of a documentary. Maybe what's challenging for directors is how can we make the subject interesting, which sounds kind of strange because a composer is someone who works with visuals and works with sound and marries the two together, so you've already got two important ingredients that you can put on screen to make it compelling. And I guess it's kind of strange that there aren't that many documentaries on composers, but maybe there's a certain fear that people might find the whole process a bit challenging to understand, when in reality I don't think it's any different than, let's say, a documentary on a specific rock icon or a specific rock band. I mean, it still involves the creation of music.
Well, certainly I hope people don't find it boring. What I think is Czech director Petr, what he found interesting and appealing to him was not only my work, my music, but also the life, the process, how I came from small town in Moravia, in former Czechoslovakia, via Sweden, my emigration to Sweden, from Sweden to Los Angeles and back to Sweden, and then finally moved to Los Angeles to follow my dream to write for the big screen. From small town, from nowhere. Maybe that's what was appealing to him, not only the music and what I achieved, but the whole my journey of my life. That maybe was interesting for him.
Will the documentary get a release either in North America or perhaps in Europe?
I'm not sure about this part. I'm not part of the production. The only thing I know is the documentary has a premiere in 3 weeks in a festival in Prague, in a film festival called Golden Prague, and I was honored to be invited to the premiere. So I'm leaving 3 weeks to Prague.
I'm sure it'll be a wonderful experience.
I'm sure it's going to be great. Yes.
The soundtrack to Atlas Shrugged Part 3, Who is John Galt, is available on CD directly from Atlas Productions and digitally from iTunes and Amazon.com. To read 3 prior printed interviews with Elia Cmiral, please visit the podcast interviews profile section at KQEK.com. For more information on the making of the visuals featured in this podcast, please visit bigheadamusements.com. For reviews, further interviews, and additional information, please visit KQEK.com. For podcasting services, including editing and mixing, please visit the Multimedia Skills section at mondomark.com for further information plus media samples. This program is copyrighted 2014 by Mark R. Hassan.